Thousands of protesters are turning out in Iran for another day of anti-government protests. Demonstrations have entered their third week and nearly 3 days under an internet blackout. Rights groups say the death toll has risen to more than 500 people and more than 10,000 have been detained. But despite that, Iran's exiled Iranian crown prince is encouraging demonstrators to stay in the streets.
Despite being completely cut off from the world, internet shutdown, and for a regime that is massacring its own people, this is an opportunity to liberate that nation. Remember, the same thugs that hate America also hate their own people. More importantly is what we're doing right now. As you can see, people are still fighting despite this crackdown. They hope that there will be assistance in protecting them from further bloodshed. I've called upon further strikes, and that's beginning to unfold. We're beginning to see more and more defections, which is very important as part of the transition. So all of this is at play as we speak.
The U.S.-based prince says he is prepared to return to Iran at the first opportunity to lead a transition to a democratic government. But in the meantime, U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to intervene, and Iran is threatening retaliation against the U.S. and Israel. The rallies started as anger over economic problems and have now turned into the country's largest anti-government protests in years. In a time of isolation within the country, Iranians are seeing solidarity from across the globe. These images show thousands of protesters filling the streets of major European cities to protest Iran's harsh crackdown on protests. The crowds also include large numbers of those within the Iranian diaspora hoping for a change in regime. Signs are seen throughout the crowds reading "Free Iran." Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is commenting on the situation in Iran. It follows Tehran's warning that U.S. military bases and Israel would be legitimate targets if Washington attacks. CBC senior correspondent Sasha Petrusik has more from Jerusalem.
Well, Linda, Israel is on high alert here. They are talking about really looking at what might happen if Iran does keep going down this road. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made some statements today, fairly low-key ones, supporting the demonstrators and saying that Israel and Iran would be in have a much better relationship if, in fact, there was a change in regime, but not pushing for that kind of a regime change nearly as strongly as we have heard from the United States. A few days ago, he did tell The Economist magazine that there would be horrible consequences if Iran did decide to strike back at Israel in particular, but also the United States in response to some kind of an attack that could come from the United States. Now, on that issue, Netanyahu spoke to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday, where they discussed what is happening in Iran and what the consequences could be. No details, of course, of that conversation, but obviously the two countries have a great deal of contact. What all of this seems to be depending on is what the next step is from the United States. Over the past few days, U.S. President Donald Trump has been pretty clear that he wants to act somehow against Iran if it continues to crack down on demonstrators. He has said that in so many words, and he put out a post on social media yesterday saying that Iran is looking at freedom perhaps like never before, referring to the demonstrators, of course. The USA stands ready to help. And before that, he also said that the U.S. could be hitting Iran very hard if Iran cracks down against the demonstrators. So a lot of talk, not very clear where it's all headed. And of course, Israel is looking at the potential for another war with Iran, the second in 6 months. 6 months ago, there were missiles flying through the air behind me here in Jerusalem because, of course, there was a 12-day war between Israel and Iran. The United States also got involved. So we could be seeing a repeat of something like that Except, of course, we have an Iran that is much weaker militarily now, also perhaps more unpredictable because there's more at stake domestically in Iran as far as the leadership goes and the threat of regime change. So all of this is very much up in the air at the moment, and people here in Israel are watching nervously at the skies, hoping that they don't see a repeat of what they saw 6 months ago when, in fact, a number of those missiles landed here. Linda?
CBC senior correspondent Sasha Petrusik in Jerusalem. Earlier, we spoke with Kaveh Shahrouz, an Iranian-Canadian lawyer, about the protests there and the government crackdown. He's also a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, a government policy think tank. And he says many Iranians have long demanded regime change, and there's optimism that it might happen.
Well, there's several different feelings that I have, and I think, members of the Iranian-Canadian community, Iranians across the world, all perhaps share these feelings, even though they may disagree on politics. One is that we thought this was inevitable. The Iranian people are angry and have been angry for many, many years at a regime that squanders the potential of that country, that kills them, that treats women like second-class citizens, that takes the country's wealth and, builds up proxy terrorist groups around the region. And that doesn't have any answers to the country's and the citizens' grievances. So this protest and this demand for regime change has been a long time coming. There is a degree of optimism that perhaps things will finally change, that this regime will finally fall. But there is also immense fear and worry. I have family and friends in Iran. I have not been able to be in touch with them for nearly 3 days. I'm very worried about them. You hear news trickle out indicating that the regime is unleashing some truly heinous violence and that thousands are dying. So I think a lot of us are deeply, deeply worried about our loved ones.
Yeah, as you say, many members have desired this change in the community for years. So when you hear about the numbers like what we're seeing right now, latest numbers coming out, the deaths from these protests have risen to more than 500, thousands of arrests as well. How are you feeling about the means at which they're getting to this change that some perhaps desire?
Well, first of all, I'm consistently blown away by the courage of the Iranian people, the fact that they're willing to put their bodies on the line to fight for freedom, to fight for democracy and human rights. It's truly nothing short of awe-inspiring. But as I said earlier, I worry about them greatly. They're not armed, but they're going up against one of the most brutal dictatorships of the contemporary era. President Trump has said a fair bit in recent days about wanting to defend the protesters. If he is going to take some action, I think now would be the time to do it.
That was Kaveh Shahrouz, a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute.